This week on Match Point Canada, we're very excited to welcome former Wimbledon finalist, Olympian, and top 10 player on the ATP, MaliVai Washington, to talk about his career, his foundation, and so much more. Mal, it's a real privilege to have you here. Welcome to the podcast.
Mike, it is great to be on. I'm looking forward to our time together. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's I got to say, I was a big fan of you and your whole generation really growing up. That's when I was a kid, picked up a tennis racket for the first time and really got into it. So it's pretty special to have you here today for me and for Ben. Maybe you can tell our listeners, they know a lot about your tennis career, but about what's been keeping you busy these days, whether it be inside or outside of the sport.
Well, inside of the sport and outside of the sport, a lot of my time is really around two things. One, my family, my son who's in college, so we're spending a fair amount of time heading up to Virginia and visiting him at college and watching some of his games. My daughter is a senior in high school, so we're going to her games a ton. Certainly, within the world of tennis, my youth foundation here in Jacksonville, Florida, has kept me busy for really the last 26 years. So everything we're doing there, that has kept me busy. And certainly, on the non-tennis side, one of my second loves, or maybe my third love behind tennis and my youth foundation, is the business of real estate. So that is what I spend most of my time doing. And unfortunately, and this might sound really bad considering my background, every year I find myself watching a little bit less tennis. Which kind of drives me nuts because a big tournament will come around and I'm really looking forward to it. And then I just get busy with other stuff, and then all of a sudden I feel like I'm turning on the TV when it's deep into the third set or the fifth set or towards the end of the tournament. But I try to catch a little tennis on TV when I can.
Do your kids play tennis? Is that a passion or an interest for them?
There's zero interest in my kids playing tennis. They each probably played tennis maybe one summer, and it just never stuck. They were both really interested in team sports. I coached a little bit of my son's baseball and my daughter's volleyball, not volleyball, but softball. And they never took to tennis. I think there was something about being around a bunch of kids, and my daughter, she never wanted to miss out on anything with her friends. So for her, it was a big social thing. And then I think for my son, he had a couple of friends that were on the baseball team with him. So that's what they graduated to.
That's really interesting that you sort of have that diversity of sports that your kids are playing, because for yourself, you come from such a strong tennis background in the sense that your father played, your siblings all played professionally as well. What do you think maybe made you as a kid really fall in love with the sport and really stick with it and know that was kind of going to be your path?
When I started playing tennis at 5 years old, it was just like any other kid picking up football, basketball, tennis, soccer, baseball, lacrosse. My dad put a racket in my hand, and you can make any sport fun for a kid. And I think for me, playing my first tournament was what kind of kept my interest. There was just something about being 7 years old on the court. You walk out there with one racket, two tennis balls, and you're playing against another kid. And you have an opportunity to win one of those $3 Stickman trophies. And there was just something cool about that. And looking back on it was kind of funny because in most matches, if I was losing, I was crying on the changeovers. If I'm winning, the other kid's crying. And there was something about you walk up off the court and you're like, yeah, I want to do that again. So for me, the competition and being able to compete, and of course, having some success early certainly helps. The more success and you're winning tournaments and beating players and you're getting a state or a national ranking, that certainly helps and is kind of cool because you're one of the cool kids in school with that.
Yeah, no doubt. I think for a lot of tennis fans, when they do hear your name, and myself included, we're thinking of that incredible Wimbledon finals run in 1996. But I'd be curious, maybe for yourself, some other memories from your career that stand out. Are there any maybe victories or titles you're particularly proud of outside of that run at the All England Club?
Oh, sure. Certainly the Wimbledon run in '96 is right up there. My biggest three were certainly that run later that summer representing the United States in the Olympics. in Atlanta was absolutely tremendous. There's just something about being there at the opening ceremonies in the United States. You feel like 80,000 people were looking directly at you, not the other athletes, but directly at me. That's the feeling you get. And I literally had other athletes saying, what was that like? What was that moment like there? Because it was special for them. But being an American, what was it like? And for me, also representing my country in Davis Cup, the first time in Charlotte, North Carolina, then the Czech Republic in Prague, and then the last time in Brazil. That was the last time I represented the country. So that was pretty special. And the fun, not the funny thing about it, but the interesting thing about that trip to Brazil, I played Gustavo Kuerten on the opening day, and I didn't know who he was. And that happened to be the day I injured my knee, which was kind of the beginning of the end of my career. I just didn't know it at the time. But a couple months later, having had knee surgery, I'm watching Gustavo win Roland Garros for the first time. And literally in February '97, I'd heard his name, but I'd never met him. I had never seen him. So I didn't know anything about his game. And then a few months later, he's winning Roland Garros. So, but those are, three of the, kind of the biggest moments of my career. Certainly winning my first tournament in Memphis in 1992. That was special. And certainly a few individual wins were pretty special when you're beating some of those big names.
How often do you get asked about that Wimbledon run? Because that's going to be my next question. But I'm just curious how many times a week or so do you get asked about that?
Well, here's the thing. I never get asked about the Wimbledon run. I don't. I get asked about the streaker who ran naked across the court right before the start of the Wimbledon run. And I usually kind of divert the conversation into maybe the match or something like that. And no one wants to hear about the actual match. They just want to know like what happened to the streaker. So that I hear that or get sent on social media that picture every once in a while. Usually around Wimbledon time.
That wasn't going to be one of mine, but you kind of took it for me there, I guess, and ran with it. So no pun intended. For me, Wimbledon was always the big one. I mean, that was the tournament as a kid that I didn't matter what we were doing as a family, whether we were at home, a vacation on the beach, like I was staying in and watching tennis all day long. And so your run to the finals for me is a very vivid memory. I recently just rewatched the fifth set against Todd Martin, where you trailed 5-1 double break and were able to come back and win that match. It's just unreal to watch. But what clicked for you during that 2-week period of time? And how did that result both help you, but maybe also challenge you moving forward in your career afterwards?
It was that run for the 2 weeks was extremely special. And it was interesting because I wasn't one of those guys who was going deep into the second week very often. Okay. You had Agassi, Becker, Edberg. I mean, all those big names who were going deep into the second week. And in my half of the draw, a couple of those big names dropped out. Agassi lost. Becker pulled out due to injury. And so the draw, that half opens wide up. And you knew someone who had never gone deep at Wimbledon was going to get through. And it just happened to be me. And that match against Todd down 5-1, that's certainly a special comeback for me and a great memory for me, probably a terrible memory for him. But we're friends and we can talk about it now. It's one of those things throughout the course of the year, you probably win 1 or 2 matches that you should have lost, and you probably lose a couple of matches that you should have won. And for me, for whatever reason, things aligned and someone was looking out for me and I got through. So that was very, very special. One of those moments that you dream about as a kid, but you don't ever know if you're going to get there. You feel like you feel like you can because some of your competitors who you've played against and beaten have gotten there. And when I say my competitors, Andre Agassi, he goes on and wins Wimbledon in '92, and I've had wins over him, and Michael Chang having great success, and I've had wins over him, or Stefan Edberg, and I'm thinking I'm beating these guys, but I'm not getting to that next level at a major. So in my head, I'm thinking I have it in me, but you don't know until you actually do it. And for me, from that point on, I was looking for bigger and better. And it just so happened that 7 months after that Wimbledon run is when I injured my knee playing Davis Cup in February '97, and that was kind of the beginning of the downhill of my playing career.
You mentioned so
I'm
many. Sorry, Ben.
no,
You
go
mentioned
ahead.
so many big players there: Becker, Edberg, Agassi, Sampras. I mean, you played during such a great time for American men's tennis. Not to mention all the other fantastic players that were out there. We talk, the past 15 years about the big three and how they don't give people a chance. But I feel like during your day, there were a good 10 to 15 guys who were all super incredible tennis players as well. Who was the toughest for you to face from that group?
I'd say two. I never had a lot of success against Sampras. I remember I was talking to a group of kids at a high school once and said, and they had asked that question. I was like, well, probably Sampras. I'm 0-6 against him. And a kid stands up and says, excuse me, sir, it's actually 0-7. I was like, no, okay, you can leave now. No more
Nice.
questions from you. He was always tough. His game matched up very, very well against my game, as it did with so many players. Michael Chang, I always felt was a tough mental challenge because you never knew, you never felt like he was going to go away. There's some players out there you felt like if you could get on top of them early, that they'd kind of fade a little bit, or they would have a mental lapse that you could take advantage of. And Chang wasn't really that player at all. So had a couple of wins over him, but he was one of those players that gave me fits, but I loved it. That's what you love about the sport, when you can play against the greats and have success.
It was great hearing you mention the opportunity to, of course, represent the United States not only in the Olympics but on a few key Davis Cup teams. Canada, of course, just came off an historic Davis Cup title this past season, our first in our country's history. Davis Cup, Mike and I both absolutely love it as an event, and I feel like it's the type of event that needs maybe more attention, maybe a bigger platform. Do you feel that way too? And do you think could we reach a stage where maybe Davis Cup is something that's being heavily broadcasted across the United States? It gains that sort of big interest nationally.
I think it has the potential to get there, but there's so much focus on the majors. And I think the majors will always be the biggest and the best events out there. And that is really where your career is gauged or measured by how you do at the majors, not necessarily at Davis Cup, though I would have loved to have been on a winning Davis Cup team. It would be nice if Davis Cup was to tennis as maybe Ryder Cup is to golf.
Mm-hmm.
So the big four majors in golf, as big as those are, Ryder Cup is just something that's just massive. It's a very special event. And in my opinion, it's there amongst the players, but not necessarily amongst the broader public. But when I think of Davis Cup, I always think of the fact that, I had a pretty solid career, but when it came to Davis Cup, there was always going to be like 4 or 5 guys who were going to get asked before me. Sampras, right. Agassi, Courier, Chang, maybe Todd Martin, depending on the surface. And then if all of them kind of said no, or one of them said no, it's like, oh, let's go ask Mal Washington. He'll play. So it in that regard, it kind of stunk because I didn't get a lot of opportunities to play, only 3 opportunities to play Davis Cup. But I have a lot of respect for those players who represent their country and can succeed in Davis Cup. What Canada did was very, very special, and you could see it in the reaction from the players and the fans and the Canadians. To win Davis Cup is a big, big deal, and it's something that is in the history books forever, and so that's pretty special.
Yeah, well said. It feels like now in men's tennis, at least, we're kind of reaching a transition phase in the game. Of course, with Federer's retirement, Rafael Nadal, Novak Djokovic getting older, and at the tail end of finally, that's right. Finally, at the tail end of their careers, although they're still winning, which is unbelievable. But I know before we started recording, you mentioned finding it hard to find time to watch tennis for yourself. But are there any players of this generation or this crop that you really keep your eye on or you're particularly interested in?
I mean, how do you not be a fan of Alcaraz?
Yeah.
How do you not be a fan of Coco Gauff? I mean, to think two teenagers doing what they love to do and doing it at the highest level. And I'm looking at both of their games and thinking they could be improving literally for the next 5 years. But if they just sustained where they are right now, they're gonna be Hall of Fame players. So I think between the two of them, it's pretty cool to just think about where they could be throughout their careers. I think I saw a stat recently that Venus, Serena, Coco, and maybe Lindsay Davenport are the only players to have like 10 WTA finals as a teenager. So that just kind of shows, those are all Hall of Famers, and that just shows you kind of the trajectory that Coco's career is on right now. But looking at what Carlos Alcaraz did at the U.S. Open last year, I mean, how do you not be a fan of that guy? And of course, my daughter is a fan of him. So
Feel like tennis is in good hands with the names you just mentioned. I wanted to ask you a non-tennis related question, although maybe there's a bit of a tie-in here. But with February and Black History Month just coming to a close, I wanted to ask you what Black History Month means to you, and how important it is in terms of the place it should occupy in the world of tennis, where we've seen so many great Black champions in the past and influential Black tennis players such as yourself, of course.
I mean, certainly I acknowledge and appreciate Black History Month. I'm one who doesn't think it should necessarily be relegated to 1 month a year. I think there are stories, not just of Black people, but of all people that can be celebrated throughout the course of the year. But I think for me, to be on with you two and to be recognized during February for the things I was able to do in the sport of tennis, it's great. I hope that somehow, some way, I can provide a little spark or a little bit of inspiration to other athletes or other young boys and girls in or out of the world of tennis. Certainly with my foundation, I hope maybe what I was able to do in the sport and what I'm doing now, maybe that can provide a little bit of inspiration and direction to them. But when I think of Black History Month, I also really think about the history of not just people in the sport of tennis, but outside of the sport. I look at, certainly feel a responsibility to carry myself and hold myself in a manner that my parents, grandparents, and my great-greats can be proud of. And I literally carry pictures of my parents and my grandparents, but especially my great-great-grandfather, the oldest picture the family has. And I think about kind of the era he was born in the mid 1800s. And I want him kind of looking down on me and saying, yeah, that's my great-great right there. And be proud of what he sees. So I feel like there's a responsibility that I have to the current and the future generations, whether it's my kids or players or non-players, to carry myself and to represent me and my family in the best way that I can.
I mean, I definitely get that sense from you just in terms of following along in your Instagram account. And I got to say, I really enjoy those beach chats you have on your videos there, and makes me wish I had that kind of scenery up here in Canada. But I just really appreciate, I find them so motivational and so positive, and I'm sure most of your followers do as well who tune in. There was one recently where you were talking about Arthur Ashe and how 20-year-old MaliVai Washington, 20-year-old you, got to meet him, but didn't take full advantage of that moment. And I thought that was a really important message for younger people today, and people of all ages, really. But maybe you could just elaborate on that a little bit for our listeners.
Sure. I had the opportunity, fortunately, on more than one occasion, but I was at the University of Michigan. I was in my sophomore year. I was the #1 player in the country. Arthur Ashe was visiting the university. He was at our tennis center, and he talked to us a little bit, and the tennis team, and we took a couple of pictures. And in my video, I was saying there was an opportunity right there for me, right in front of me, to reach out to Mr. Ashe and say, Mr. Ashe, do you think I could have your phone number? Do you think we could trade phone numbers and maybe I could call you once a month, twice a year, whatever the case may be? Do you think at 20 years old, I took advantage of it? No, I didn't take advantage of it. Just imagine if you had the great Arthur Ashe as a mentor or as an advisor. If I had asked him, could we spend a little bit of time together on the phone or face to face, he would have bent over backwards and said yes. And my whole point of the video is, and I speak to a lot of young people about this, about taking advantage of those opportunities that are right in front of you, that are staring you in the face. You just have to have the guts to get out of your comfort zone and ask the question, get out of your comfort zone and say hello and meet someone, and or give out a business card, or apply for that job or that internship, or ask that person to practice. Hey, you mind if we hit a few balls? Whatever the case may be. And the worst they can do is like, no, now's not a good time, or maybe a little bit later. Or the best they can do is like, sure, yeah, let's go hit a couple of balls. Or absolutely, here's my phone number. Let's talk later today. So my message was, take advantage of the opportunities that you have. And the more you do it, the more you'll get used to it. And you will never regret those efforts of stepping outside of your comfort zone.
Oh, that's a fantastic message. And I wanted to ask about your youth foundation, because I think for you, not just through your career, but since it's finished, you've encompassed the importance of being a role model as a professional athlete. Of course, you were honored winning the Arthur Ashe Humanitarian Award in 2009, which feels very fitting. But you've now worked in the Jacksonville community with your youth foundation for, as you said, 26 years. How important has that cause been to you? And maybe if you could explain some of the work you're doing actively now.
No, I appreciate you asking that question. It's me not feeling the responsibility as an athlete, but just feeling the responsibility as a citizen of my community to try to do something. And for me, working with kids is something I'm passionate about. I love to, whether it's getting on the tennis court or just talking with them or engaging with them. I'm a big believer in exposing kids to different experiences, but also leading by example. So every thing I require and every rule we have at the foundation, it starts with me, with how I dress, how I act, how I represent myself. And young people notice that. And I want them to notice that I am following every single rule that we have for them. But my foundation, the MaliVai Washington Youth Foundation, we started 26 years ago just as a tennis program, just exposing kids to the sport of tennis, what I consider the greatest sport in the world. And I was just hoping kids could get from the sport what I've been able to get, and that value of hard work and sticking to a task and sportsmanship and so many character building things. And it has morphed into an after school tennis life skills and education program, serving a big group, hundreds of kids in the inner city of Jacksonville, 5 days a week after school. In fact, right now we have a couple hundred kids at our youth programs, and just trying to keep them on track, kindergarten all the way through high school. And we're serving some kids, some young adults now who are in college, and really trying to use the platform that I have to, in some small way, better someone else's life. That's what we're trying to do.
Well, I think it's more than some small way. And I know it was, now 14 years ago that you received that honor, but did it help maybe shine a light a little bit on your cause to win that humanitarian award in 2009?
It did. And I think what I appreciate about it, and with my name on the organization, I get a lot of recognition and credit and notoriety around the things that we're doing. But I think it really validated for all of our staff, volunteers, that what we're doing is working, and a lot of people are recognizing it. What we're doing is impacting the lives of some kids, and people are appreciating that. So I accepted the award, but it was really, I accepted the award on behalf of all of our full and part-time staff and all of our volunteers and donors who have ever supported us, because I'm just one individual. And over the years, we've had literally thousands of staff and volunteers and donors who have contributed in some way into the lives of the kids.
That's so impressive and so inspirational. And Mal, for all you accomplished on the court in your tennis career, to see what you've done since then and are continuing to do is just really something else. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with Ben and I today, and for our listeners here at Matchpoint Canada, across Canada and other places. We really appreciate it. It's been fantastic to get to chat with you today.
Mike, I appreciate it. Ben, thank you as well. And maybe one day we'll do it again.
We'd love to.
That.
Thanks.